Sarah Martinez never planned to adopt a pit bull. The 28-year-old veterinary assistant had always been a cat person, living in her cozy apartment with 3 rescue cats named Whiskers, Luna, and Midnight. Her small living space seemed perfect for feline companions, but life had other plans. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when everything changed. Sarah arrived at the animal clinic where she worked to find Dr. Peterson examining a tiny, shivering puppy that couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old. The little creature was covered in mud, his ribs visible through his thin coat, and his eyes held a mixture of fear and hope that broke Sarah's heart immediately. Found him in a cardboard box behind the dumpster, Dr. Peterson explained, his voice heavy with concern. Whoever left him there didn't even bother to make holes for air. He's severely malnourished and has some minor injuries, but nothing we can't fix. As Sarah approached the examination table, the puppy lifted his head weakly. Despite his pitiful condition, his tail attempted a small wag. The moment their eyes met, Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just any puppy. This was a Pitbull mix, and she knew how difficult it would be to find him a home. Many shelters in their area had strict policies about the breed, and even more potential adopters would pass him by due to unfair stereotypes. "What happens to him now?" Sarah asked, though she already dreaded the answer. Dr. Peterson sighed deeply. "We'll treat him and try to find a rescue that specializes in pit bulls, but you know how full they are. If we can't find placement within a week..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what happened to unwanted animals, especially those considered difficult to place. Throughout that day, Sarah found herself constantly checking on the puppy. She named him Milo, though she tried to convince herself it was just temporary. During her lunch break, she sat beside his kennel, watching as he slowly ate small portions of food. His appetite was returning, which was a good sign, but she could see the emotional scars were deeper than the physical ones. "You're getting attached," Dr. Peterson observed, finding Sarah sitting with Milo for the 3rd time that day. "I'm just making sure he's comfortable," Sarah replied, but they both knew it was more than that. That evening, Sarah drove home with a heavy heart. Her apartment felt different somehow, even with her 3 cats greeting her at the door. Whiskers, her oldest cat, seemed to sense her mood and rubbed against her legs more insistently than usual. Luna and Midnight followed suit, creating a purring chorus that normally would have lifted her spirits. As she prepared dinner for her cats, Sarah's mind kept wandering back to Milo. She imagined him alone in the clinic kennel, probably confused and scared. She had fostered animals before, but never a dog, and certainly never a pit bull. Her apartment was small, her cats were set in their ways, and she had no experience with dogs. It seemed like a recipe for disaster. But something about Milo was different. Despite everything he had been through, there was a gentleness in his eyes that reminded her of her cats. When she had touched him during his examination, he hadn't flinched or shown any signs of aggression. Instead, he had leaned into her touch as if starved for affection. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Milo alone in the clinic and about all the statistics she knew about pit bulls in shelters. She thought about her comfortable life with her cats and how easy it would be to just let someone else deal with this problem. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Milo's face looking up at her with such trust and hope. Around 3 in the morning, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She got up, grabbed her laptop, and began researching everything she could about introducing dogs to cats, about pit bull behavior, and about what it would take to give Milo a temporary home until they could find him a permanent family. The more she read, the more confident she became. Many sources mentioned that pit bulls were actually quite adaptable and could live peacefully with cats if properly introduced. Some even suggested that dogs raised with cats from a young age often adopted cat-like behaviors themselves. The idea seemed almost absurd, but Sarah found herself smiling at the thought of a dog who thought he was a cat. By morning, Sarah had made up her mind. She called Dr. Peterson before the clinic even opened. "I want to foster him," she said without preamble when he answered the phone. "Sarah, are you sure? You've never had a dog before, and your cat's, and I've been thinking about it all night. He's just a baby, and he needs someone who won't give up on him. I can't promise it will work long term, but I can give him a safe place to recover while we look for his forever home." Dr. Peterson was quiet for a moment. "You know, I was hoping you'd say that. I've seen how you are with animals, and if anyone can make this work, it's you. But we'll need to do this carefully, especially with your cats. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah puppy-proofed her apartment as best she could, set up a safe space for Milo in her bedroom, and mentally prepared herself for what might be the biggest challenge she had ever taken on. Her cats watched her unusual behavior with typical feline curiosity, unaware that their quiet world was about to be turned upside down. When Sarah arrived at the clinic that afternoon to pick up Milo, he looked much better than he had the day before. His coat had been cleaned and treated, his wounds were bandaged, and he had put on a little weight. But it was the change in his demeanor that struck her most. When he saw her approaching, his entire body wiggled with excitement, and his tail wagged so hard it created a drumbeat against the kennel wall. "Someone's happy to see you," Dr. Peterson observed with a smile. As Sarah knelt down to attach the small collar and leash she had bought, Milo immediately tried to climb into her lap. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the responsibility she was taking on. This little life was now depending on her, and she had no idea if she was making the right choice. But as Milo settled against her chest, his small body finally relaxing for what might have been the first time in his short life, Sarah knew there was no turning back. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was committed to giving this special puppy the chance he deserved. Little did she know that in trying to save Milo, she was about to discover something extraordinary about the adaptability of love, the power of environment, and the amazing ways that animals can surprise us when given the chance to simply be themselves. The car ride home was Milo's first real introduction to the world beyond the clinic. Sarah had expected him to be nervous or excited, but instead, the tiny Pitbull curled up in the carrier she had borrowed and fell fast asleep. Even in sleep, he seemed more peaceful than she had seen him before, as if he somehow knew his life was about to change for the better. Sarah's apartment building was a quiet, older structure with thin walls and neighbors who valued peace. As she climbed the stairs with Milo's carrier, she couldn't help but worry about how this would work. Dogs barked, and even small barks could cause problems with her landlord and neighbors. She had never had to think about noise complaints before. Her cats were practically silent. The moment of truth came when Sarah opened her apartment door. She had planned to take Milo directly to the bedroom she had prepared for him, but her cats had other ideas. Whiskers, Luna, and Midnight were waiting just inside the door, their curiosity clearly piqued by the unfamiliar scents wafting from the carrier. Sarah set the carrier down carefully and opened the door. Milo stepped out slowly, his nose working overtime to process all the new smells. For a moment, everyone froze. 3 cats and 1 small dog all staring at each other in what felt like the longest silence of Sarah's life. Then something remarkable happened. Instead of barking, growling, or showing any signs of typical dog behavior, Milo did something completely unexpected. He sat down and began to make a soft, rumbling sound in his throat. It wasn't quite a purr, but it wasn't a growl either. It was as if he was trying to communicate in a language he had never learned but somehow understood. Whiskers, being the elder statesman of the group, approached first. The orange tabby moved with his usual dignified grace, stopping just out of reach to sniff the air around Milo. The puppy remained perfectly still, continuing his strange, rumbling sound. After what felt like an eternity, Whiskers sat down and began to groom himself. The universal cat signal that the situation was acceptable. At least for now, Luna and Midnight, taking their cue from Whiskers, gradually came closer. Milo's tail wagged gently, but he kept his body low and non-threatening. Sarah watched in amazement as her cats began their careful inspection of their new housemate. She had expected hissing, hiding, and general chaos. Instead, she was witnessing what looked like a diplomatic summit. Over the next few hours, Sarah observed behaviors she had never seen before. When she filled the cats' food bowls, Milo watched intently but made no move to investigate their food. Instead, he waited patiently until she brought him his own bowl, which she placed in a different area of the kitchen. But what surprised her most was how he ate, delicately, almost daintily, nothing like the eager gulping she had expected from a hungry puppy. As evening approached, Sarah faced another challenge: bedtime routines. Her cats had their established sleeping spots: Whiskers on the armchair, Luna at the foot of her bed, and Midnight curled up in a basket near the window. She had set up a comfortable bed for Milo in the corner of her bedroom, complete with soft blankets and a few toys. But Milo had his own ideas about sleeping arrangements. As Sarah got ready for bed, she noticed him watching her cats intently. When Whiskers jumped onto his favorite chair, Milo's eyes tracked the movement. When Luna settled at the foot of the bed, Milo tilted his head thoughtfully. And when Midnight curled into his basket, Milo seemed to be taking mental notes. Sarah called softly to Milo, patting his new bed. He approached, sniffed the blankets, and then did something that made her laugh out loud. He began turning in small circles just like a cat kneading before settling down. After 3 precise circles, he curled into a tight ball, tucking his nose under his tail in a pose that was pure feline. "Well, that's new," Sarah whispered to herself, grinning as she watched this tiny dog who seemed to think he was a cat. The real test came in the middle of the night. Sarah woke to a soft sound she couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't the crying or whimpering she had expected from a puppy's first night in a new home. Instead, it was a gentle, rhythmic sound that seemed almost musical. Following the sound, Sarah found Milo sitting in the living room in a perfect cat-like pose, his front paws tucked neatly under his chest. He was looking out the window at the moonlit street below, and he was making that rumbling sound again. But now, in the quiet of the night, Sarah realized what it was. Milo was trying to purr. The sight was so endearing that Sarah had to resist the urge to wake up her phone and record it. Instead, she sat down on the floor nearby, not wanting to disturb what seemed like a peaceful moment. Milo acknowledged her presence with a gentle tail wag but continued his moonlight vigil. "What are you thinking about, little guy?" she whispered. As if in response, Milo turned his head toward her and made a soft sound. Not quite a bark, not quite a meow, but something entirely his own. In that moment, Sarah realized that she might be witnessing something special. This wasn't just a dog adapting to a new home. This was a young animal learning how to be himself in a world that was entirely different from anything he might have expected. The next morning brought new discoveries. Sarah woke to find all 4 animals arranged in what she would later call the morning council, her 3 cats in their usual spots, and Milo sitting nearby in that same dignified cat pose. When she got up to start her morning routine, Milo followed her to the kitchen, but instead of the enthusiastic jumping and tail wagging she expected, he walked with the measured pace of a cat. As Sarah prepared breakfast, she noticed Milo watching her cat's eating habits with the intensity of a student studying for an important exam. When Whiskers delicately picked at his food, Milo ate more slowly. When Luna sat back to wash her face between bites, Milo paused and licked his paws. It was as if he was learning the proper etiquette of his new family. The morning sun streamed through the apartment windows, highlighting dust motes that danced in the air. Luna, always the hunter, began stalking these invisible prey with typical cat intensity. Milo watched this behavior with fascination, his head tilting back and forth as he tracked Luna's movements. Then, to Sarah's complete amazement, Milo joined in. He began stalking the dust motes with the same focused intensity as Luna, his body low to the ground, his movements careful and deliberate. When Luna pounced, Milo pounced. When Luna sat back to assess the situation, Milo did the same. Sarah grabbed her coffee and settled into her favorite chair to watch this unprecedented display. Her Pitbull puppy was learning to hunt like a cat, and her cats seemed perfectly willing to accept him as a rather large, oddly shaped member of their pride. But it was Midnight who provided the most surprising acceptance. The smallest and most skittish of her cats had always been wary of changes. Yet as the morning progressed, Sarah watched Midnight approach Milo with obvious curiosity. The little black cat sniffed around the puppy carefully, then did something remarkable. He began to groom Milo's ears. Milo sat perfectly still during this grooming session, his eyes half closed in what looked like pure bliss. When Midnight finished, Milo attempted to return the favor, gently licking Midnight's head with his much larger tongue. Instead of being offended, Midnight seemed to approve of this exchange. By the end of Milo's second day in the apartment, Sarah realized that her initial plan to find him another home was becoming more complicated. It wasn't just that he was adapting well to life with cats, he was becoming a cat himself, in all the ways that mattered. And her cats, rather than merely tolerating him, seemed to be actively teaching him how to be part of their family. 2 weeks into Milo's stay, Sarah began documenting what she was witnessing because she knew no one would believe her without proof. The transformation happening in her apartment was unlike anything she had read about in veterinary journals or animal behavior books. Milo wasn't just living with cats. He was becoming one of them in ways that defied everything she thought she knew about dogs. The first video she recorded was of Milo's morning routine. Like her cats, he had developed a precise sequence of behaviors that started each day. He would wake up, stretch in a way that looked remarkably like the yoga pose called downward dog, but which Sarah now realized was identical to how cats stretch their spine. Then he would sit by his food bowl and wait patiently, just as Whiskers, Luna, and Midnight did. But it was his eating habits that truly amazed her. Milo had completely abandoned the enthusiastic gulping that characterized most dogs. Instead, he ate with the delicate precision of a cat, taking small bites and pausing to look around between each one. He even developed the cat habit of leaving a little food in his bowl, as if saving it for later. The most remarkable change was in how Milo moved through the apartment. Gone was any trace of typical puppy energy, or the bounding gait associated with his breed. Instead, he moved with feline grace, stepping carefully and silently. His paws seemed to find the exact spots that wouldn't create creaking sounds on the old wooden floors. Sarah's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who lived in the apartment below, confirmed this when they met in the hallway one morning. "I was wondering when you got rid of that dog," Mrs. Chen said conversationally. "I haven't heard any barking or running around upstairs in over a week." "Actually, he's still there," Sarah replied, smiling at the older woman's surprised expression. "Really? But it's been so quiet. Are you sure he's okay?" This conversation made Sarah realize just how completely Milo had adapted to apartment living through his feline education. Traditional dogs, especially energetic breeds like Pitbulls, often struggled with the confined space and noise restrictions of apartment life. But Milo had learned from masters of discreet living. Her cats had taught him how to be a perfect apartment companion without ever making him feel like he had to hide his true nature. The breakthrough moment came during Milo's third week when Sarah witnessed something that made her grab her phone to record immediately. She was working from home when she heard a commotion in the living room. Expecting to find some kind of chaos, she instead discovered all four animals engaged in what could only be described as a group grooming session. Whiskers was methodically cleaning Luna's ears while Luna worked on Midnight's fur, and there in the middle of this feline ritual was Milo, gently licking Whiskers' head while Midnight worked on cleaning Milo's face. The sight was so surreal that Sarah had to blink several times to make sure she wasn't imagining it. But what made the scene even more extraordinary was the sound. All four animals were making contented noises. The cats were purring, and Milo was making that unique rumbling sound that had become his version of purring. The harmony of these sounds created a peaceful soundtrack that filled the apartment with warmth. Sarah recorded several minutes of this grooming session, knowing it would become one of her most treasured videos. But more than that, she realized she was documenting something that might be scientifically significant. Here was proof that dogs could learn complex social behaviors from cats, and that the learning went far beyond simple mimicry. As Milo grew, his cat-like behaviors became more pronounced rather than fading away. At 4 months old, he had mastered the art of the cat nap, finding sunny spots throughout the apartment and curling up in them for hours. He learned to appreciate the simple pleasure of lying in a warm patch of sunlight, something that seemed to bring him the same deep contentment it brought his feline mentors. The climbing behavior started gradually. Sarah first noticed Milo attempting to jump onto low furniture, trying to copy his cat siblings who effortlessly leaped onto chairs and sofas. His early attempts were clumsy, after all. He was built very differently than a cat, but his determination was impressive. Within a month, Milo had figured out how to get onto the sofa, and from there, he worked his way up to higher surfaces. Sarah came home from work one day to find him perched on the back of her armchair, sitting in perfect cat pose and looking quite pleased with himself. Whiskers sat nearby looking like a proud teacher whose student had finally mastered a difficult lesson. But it was Milo's relationship with the litter box that provided both the biggest challenge and the most amusing breakthrough. Sarah had noticed him watching her cats use their litter box with intense curiosity. At first, she thought it was just natural curiosity about something that smelled interesting. The reality was much more complex. Milo had been observing his cat family's bathroom habits as part of his comprehensive study of proper household behavior. While he never attempted to use the litter box himself, apparently some boundaries of species difference remained intact. He did develop an unusual habit of sitting nearby while the cats used it, as if offering moral support or standing guard. This led to the development of what Sarah called the bathroom buddy system. Whenever one of the cats went to use the litter box, Milo would quietly accompany them and sit at a respectful distance until they were finished. The cats not only tolerated this behavior, but seemed to appreciate having a guardian. During their vulnerable moments, Dr. Peterson was fascinated when Sarah shared videos of Milo's progress during his regular checkups. As a veterinarian with over 20 years of experience, he had seen many cases of dogs and cats learning to coexist, but nothing quite like this. This isn't just adaptation, he explained to Sarah. This is cultural learning. Milo is acquiring the behavioral patterns of cat society, because that's the only society he's known. He's not fighting his dog nature. He's expressing it through a feline framework. This observation made Sarah think about Milo's future in a new way. She had started fostering him with the intention of finding him a permanent home, but now she wondered if any other environment could provide what he had found in her apartment. Where else would he find a family that understood and appreciated his unique personality? The decision crystallized one evening as Sarah sat reading on her sofa. Whiskers was curled in his favorite chair, Luna was stretched out on the windowsill, and Midnight was in his basket. Milo was curled up next to Sarah, not in the demanding way of many dogs, but with the polite consideration of a cat who had asked permission to share the space. As she scratched behind Milo's ears, Sarah felt him begin that rumbling purr-like sound that had become his signature. Looking around at her peaceful apartment, at this unlikely family that had formed so naturally, she realized that Milo wasn't her foster dog anymore. Somewhere in the process of learning to be a cat, he had simply become her dog. The thought of separating him from Whiskers, Luna, and Midnight now seemed not just difficult, but actually cruel. They had become a unit, a family with its own unique dynamics and relationships. Milo wasn't just living with cats, he was part of a cat family, and that family wouldn't be complete without him. That night, Sarah called Dr. Peterson and made it official. She was adopting Milo permanently. The little Pitbull who had been found abandoned behind a dumpster now had a forever home where his unusual personality wasn't just accepted, but celebrated. As Milo grew from a tiny puppy into a young dog, his unique personality became impossible to ignore. At 6 months old, he was clearly a Pitbull in physical appearance. His characteristic broad head, muscular build, and distinctive markings made his breed unmistakable. But his behavior continued to be purely feline, creating a fascinating contradiction that Sarah found endlessly entertaining. The first time Sarah's friend Jessica visited after Milo's adoption, her reaction was priceless. Jessica had been hearing stories about the dog who thinks he's a cat for months, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. She arrived expecting to meet a typical Pitbull puppy, and instead found Milo perched on top of the bookshelf, looking down at her with the aloof dignity of a cat surveying its domain. How did he even get up there? Jessica asked, staring in disbelief. Watch, Sarah said, then called Milo's name softly. Instead of barking or jumping down excitedly like most dogs would, Milo gracefully descended from shelf to shelf, landing silently on the floor. He then approached Jessica with the measured caution of a cat meeting a stranger, allowing her to extend her hand for him to sniff before deciding whether she was worthy of his attention. "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen," Jessica whispered, as Milo finally deemed her acceptable and rubbed against her legs in classic cat fashion. "He's huge, but he moves like he weighs nothing." This reaction became typical whenever new people met Milo. Sarah's family, friends, and co-workers all struggled to reconcile what they were seeing with what they expected from a pit bull. The breed had such strong stereotypes attached to it, both positive and negative, but Milo fit none of them. He wasn't aggressive or protective, but he also wasn't the typical goofy, energetic dog that breed advocates often described. He was something entirely new. The most challenging aspect of Milo's unique personality became apparent during his first visit to the dog park. Sarah had been hesitant to try this, knowing that Milo's social education had been entirely feline, but Dr. Peterson encouraged her to expose him to other dogs gradually. The experience was awkward from the moment they arrived. Other dogs approached Milo with typical canine greeting behaviors, sniffing, play bowing, and attempting to engage him in the rough-and-tumble play that most dogs enjoyed. Milo's response was to sit down and observe them with the same detached interest he showed when watching birds outside the apartment window. When a friendly golden retriever tried to initiate play by jumping and barking, Milo simply walked away and found a quiet spot to sit in the sunshine. When other dogs tried to sniff him in the typical dog greeting ritual, Milo tolerated it politely, but showed no interest in reciprocating. It was clear that he didn't understand the social language of dogs any more than the dogs understood his feline-influenced behavior. "Is he okay?" asked another dog owner, watching Milo's aloof behavior with concern. "He seems kind of antisocial." "He's not antisocial," Sarah explained. "He's just different. He was raised with cats." This became a conversation that Sarah had frequently. People assumed that Milo's unusual behavior indicated some kind of problem or trauma, when in reality he was simply expressing his personality in the only way he knew how. He wasn't broken or antisocial, he was just a dog who had learned to be himself within a feline cultural framework. The real breakthrough in understanding Milo's social needs came when Sarah's neighbor brought her cat Olive to visit. Olive was a confident social cat who had no fear of dogs, having grown up with them. When Olive entered Sarah's apartment, something magical happened. Milo immediately perked up in a way Sarah had never seen before. His whole body language changed as he approached Olive with the excited but respectful energy of someone meeting a new friend who spoke the same language. The two animals began an elaborate greeting ritual that was pure cat: careful circling, delicate sniffing, and eventual mutual grooming. Watching Milo interact with Olive, Sarah realized that her dog wasn't antisocial at all. He was simply social in a different way. He needed relationships that allowed for the subtle communication, respectful boundaries, and gentle affection that characterized feline friendships. The rough play and enthusiastic greetings of dog culture simply weren't his style. This understanding led Sarah to seek out other unusual animal friendships in her area. Through online groups and veterinary connections, she discovered a small community of pet owners whose animals had formed unconventional bonds. There was a dog who lived with rabbits and had learned to binky, a cat who had been raised by ferrets and loved to explore tunnels, and even a pig who thought she was a dog and went on walks with her canine siblings. Meeting these other families helped Sarah realize that Milo wasn't an anomaly. He was part of a larger phenomenon of animals learning to adapt and thrive in unexpected social environments. These cross-species relationships weren't just cute stories. They were examples of the incredible flexibility and intelligence that animals possessed when given the opportunity to develop in nurturing environments. As Milo approached his first birthday, his personality had fully stabilized into what Sarah privately called feline confidence. He moved through the world with the self-assured grace of a cat, secure in his identity and unbothered by the confusion he sometimes caused. When people stared at him for sitting in perfect sphinx pose or for his habit of slow blinking at strangers, Milo remained completely unperturbed. His relationship with Whiskers, Luna, and Midnight had also evolved into something deeper than coexistence. They had become a true family unit, with each member playing a specific role. Whiskers remained the elder statesman, offering wisdom and stability. Luna was the playful middle child, always ready for adventures in hunting dust motes or stalking invisible prey. Midnight was the shy baby of the group, often seeking comfort from the others. And Milo had become the gentle giant of the family, the protector who watched over his smaller siblings with quiet devotion. Despite being the youngest chronologically, his size and calm presence made him a natural guardian. Sarah often found him sleeping near the other cats, positioned in a way that would allow him to watch the door or windows. This protective instinct manifested in subtle ways that honored his feline upbringing. Instead of the obvious guarding behavior typical of many dogs, Milo's protection was quiet and strategic. He would position himself between his cat family and any perceived threat, but without aggression or obvious display. His presence alone seemed to make the cats feel more secure. The first anniversary of Milo's adoption was celebrated with a special dinner for all 4 animals. Sarah prepared separate portions of a pet-safe cake, made from ingredients that both cats and dogs could enjoy. As she watched her unusual family sharing this meal, each eating with their own distinctive style but clearly enjoying the communal experience, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed. A year earlier, She had been a single woman with 3 cats living a quiet, predictable life. Now she was the proud owner of what might be the world's most cat-like pit bull, and her apartment had become a sanctuary for cross-species friendship. The transformation wasn't just in Milo, it was in all of them. Her cats had become more confident and social through their relationship with Milo. His calm presence seemed to give them courage, and they had all become more adventurous in their daily activities. Whiskers was more playful, Luna was more affectionate, and Midnight was less skittish around strangers. But perhaps the most significant change was in Sarah herself. Living with Milo had taught her to see beyond stereotypes and expectations, to appreciate the beauty of individuals who didn't fit conventional categories. She had become an advocate for giving animals the space to be themselves, regardless of what species they were supposed to act like. The turning point that would change everything came when Sarah decided to share Milo's story with the world. It started innocently enough. She posted a short video on social media showing Milo sitting on top of the refrigerator, calmly observing the world below like a feline overlord. The caption simply read, "My pit bull thinks he's a cat, and honestly, who am I to argue?" Within hours, the video had hundreds of views and dozens of comments from people expressing amazement, disbelief, and delight. Encouraged by the positive response, Sarah began sharing more of Milo's daily adventures. There was the video of him delicately washing his face with his paws after meals, the photo of him curled up in a perfect cat loaf position, and the clip of him making his distinctive purring sound while being petted. Each post gained more attention than the last. People were fascinated by this dog who defied every expectation about his breed and species. Comments poured in from around the world, pet owners sharing their own stories of unusual animal behavior, scientists asking questions about cross-species learning, and thousands of people simply expressing joy at discovering Milo's unique personality. The breakthrough moment came when a video of Milo and his cat siblings engaged in their evening grooming ritual went viral. The sight of a muscular pit bull gently cleaning a tiny black cat's ears while being groomed by an orange tabby was so unexpected and heartwarming that it was shared across multiple platforms within days. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," wrote one commenter. "I never knew dogs could learn to be so gentle and cat-like." "My pit bull is nothing like this," wrote another. "But after seeing Milo, I'm wondering if I should get a cat to teach him some manners." The comments revealed something important. Milo's story was changing how people thought about pit bulls specifically and about animal behavior in general. Here was a breed that was often feared or misunderstood, displaying behaviors that were the complete opposite of aggressive stereotypes. Milo's gentleness, grace, and consideration for his smaller companions provided a powerful counter-narrative to negative breed assumptions. As Milo's online following grew, Sarah began receiving messages from people whose lives were being affected by his story. A woman in Texas wrote about how Milo's videos had convinced her apartment complex to allow pit bulls, leading to several breed-specific rescues. A family in Oregon shared photos of their newly adopted pit bull, learning to coexist peacefully with their cats, inspired by Milo's example. But perhaps the most meaningful message came from a teenage girl whose family had been considering giving up their pit bull because of housing restrictions and breed discrimination. "Seeing Milo made my parents realize that our dog isn't the problem. People's attitudes are," she wrote. "We're keeping him and fighting to change minds instead of giving up." Stories like these began arriving daily. A veterinarian in Canada started showing Milo's videos to clients who were nervous about pit bulls, helping to facilitate successful adoptions. A dog trainer in Australia began incorporating Milo's calm, cat-like behaviors into her training programs, teaching dogs to be more thoughtful and gentle in their interactions. The scientific community also took notice. Dr. Angela Rodriguez, an animal behaviorist at a major university, reached out to Sarah about studying Milo's development. "What you're documenting could revolutionize our understanding of how early socialization affects behavior," she explained during their first video call. "Milo represents a unique case study in neuroplasticity and cross-species learning." The research collaboration that followed was fascinating. Dr. Rodriguez and her team conducted non-invasive behavioral assessments of Milo, comparing his responses to various stimuli with those of both typical dogs and cats. The results were remarkable. Milo's brain had indeed developed differently, showing neural pathways that more closely resembled feline responses than typical canine patterns. It's Not that he's pretending to be a cat, Dr. Rodriguez explained to Sarah. His brain has actually organized itself around feline social patterns because that was his primary learning environment during critical developmental periods. He's not a dog acting like a cat. He's a dog who learned to be a dog through cat mentorship. This scientific validation of what Sarah had observed daily made Milo's story even more compelling. Major media outlets began reaching out for interviews. The first television appearance was on a local morning show, where Sarah nervously brought Milo to demonstrate his unusual behaviors live on air. The segment was supposed to last 5 minutes, but stretched to 15 as the hosts became increasingly amazed by Milo's demonstrations. When asked to show his cat-like abilities, Milo calmly jumped onto the news desk and arranged himself in perfect sphinx position, completely unbothered by the cameras and studio lights. His calm confidence in this chaotic environment was perhaps the most impressive demonstration of his feline-influenced personality. "I've been doing this show for 20 years, the host said, clearly amazed, "and I've never seen anything like this. He's so calm and dignified, nothing like what people expect from his breed." The television appearance led to more media opportunities. National morning shows, podcasts, and even international news programs wanted to feature Milo's story. Each appearance brought new followers, and more messages from people whose perceptions of pit bulls were being challenged and changed. Sarah found herself becoming an unexpected advocate for both breed equality and the importance of early socialization. She spoke at veterinary conferences about Milo's development, participated in panels about animal behavior, and even testified at city council meetings about breed-specific legislation. Milo proves that individual animals can't be judged by breed stereotypes, she would tell audiences. If we're willing to let animals be themselves, to learn and grow in supportive environments, they'll show us capabilities we never imagined possible. The messages from rescue organizations were particularly touching. Shelters across the country reported increased interest in pit bull adoptions after potential owners saw Milo's gentle nature. Some facilities began pairing young pit bulls with calm, social cats during their socialization periods, hoping to encourage similar development. One rescue in California wrote, "We've had 3 successful adoptions this month where families specifically mentioned Milo's story as the reason they considered a pit bull. These dogs are now in loving homes instead of facing uncertain futures." But it wasn't just about breed advocacy. Milo's story was touching something deeper in people, a recognition of the importance of acceptance, understanding, and giving individuals the space to be authentically themselves. Comments on his videos often mentioned how his story had inspired people to be more open-minded in their own lives, whether about pets, people, or their own self-expression. A particularly moving message came from a mother whose autistic son had been struggling with social interactions at school. "Watching Milo be accepted for who he is, even though he's different, has helped my son understand that being different isn't wrong. It's just another way of being wonderful," she wrote. As Milo's 2nd birthday approached, Sarah reflected on how far they had all come. What had started as a simple rescue story had evolved into something much larger, a movement toward greater understanding and acceptance. Milo had become more than just a cat-like dog. He had become a symbol of possibility, proof that with love, patience, and acceptance, any individual could thrive regardless of expectations or stereotypes. The apartment that had once been a quiet haven for 3 cats had become a hub of activity. Interview requests, collaboration opportunities, and fan mail arrived regularly. But through all the attention, Milo remained unchanged, still the calm, dignified, utterly cat-like dog who had first won Sarah's heart. Watching him navigate his newfound fame with the same serene confidence he brought to everything else, Sarah realized that Milo's greatest gift wasn't just his unique behavior. It was his ability to remain authentically himself no matter what the world expected of him. In a society that often demanded conformity, Milo's gentle rebellion against species expectations had become an inspiration to be courageously, unapologetically individual. The unexpected phone call came on a Tuesday morning that would forever change not just Milo's life, but the lives of countless other animals. Sarah was getting ready for work when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was familiar from years of watching television. "Is this Sarah Martinez, Milo's mom?" asked the warm, professional voice. "This is Emma Thompson from Good Morning America. We've been following Milo's story and we'd love to have you both on the show. Sarah nearly dropped her coffee cup. Good Morning America was one of the biggest morning shows in the country, with millions of viewers. The producer explained that they wanted to do a feature segment about Milo's unique story and its impact on breed perceptions, as part of their ongoing series about remarkable animals. We're particularly interested in the scientific aspects, Emma continued. Dr. Rodriguez has agreed to appear with you to discuss her research findings. This could be a wonderful opportunity to reach people who might never have heard Milo's story otherwise. The taping was scheduled for the following month, giving Sarah time to prepare but also to worry. Television appearances at local stations were one thing, but national television felt overwhelming. What if Milo didn't cooperate? What if she said something wrong? What if the attention became too much for their quiet life? Her concerns proved unnecessary. When the day arrived, Milo handled the bright lights, bustling crew, and unfamiliar environment with his characteristic feline composure. While other dogs might have been excited or nervous, Milo simply observed everything with calm interest, as if he were watching an entertaining but not particularly concerning show. The segment exceeded everyone's expectations. Milo demonstrated his cat-like behaviors flawlessly, perching on furniture, grooming himself delicately, and even producing his signature purring sound when petted by the host. But what really captivated viewers was the footage Sarah had brought of Milo interacting with Whiskers, Luna, and Midnight at home. I have to say, the host commented while watching the video of their evening grooming ritual, this is one of the most beautiful examples of interspecies friendship I've ever seen, and it completely challenges everything I thought I knew about pit bulls. Dr. Rodriguez's explanation of the science behind Milo's development added credibility to the story that elevated it beyond just a cute animal feature. Milo represents proof of concept for how powerfully environment shapes behavior, she explained. His brain developed within a feline social structure, and the results speak for themselves. The response to the national television appearance was immediate and overwhelming. Milo's social media following grew from thousands to hundreds of thousands overnight. But more importantly, the impact on breed perception was measurable and significant. Animal shelters across the country reported increased inquiries about pit bull adoptions within days of the broadcast. The phrase Milo effect began appearing in rescue communications, as facilities documented the surge in interest for breeds that had previously been difficult to place. Dr. Martinez, at the city animal shelter in Phoenix, called Sarah personally to share the news. We've had more applications for pit bull adoptions this week than we had in the previous 6 months combined, she reported excitedly. And the applicants specifically mentioned Milo's story as changing their minds about the breed. But the impact extended far beyond breed advocacy. Educational institutions began reaching out to Sarah about using Milo's story in curricula, about animal behavior, neuroplasticity, and the importance of early socialization. Children's books authors wanted to write about Milo, and documentary filmmakers proposed, following his ongoing story. One of the most meaningful developments was the creation of Milo's method and our socialization program developed by animal behaviorists based on the cross-species learning that had shaped Milo's development. Shelters and rescue organizations began experimenting with carefully supervised interactions between young dogs and well-socialized cats, hoping to encourage similar development patterns. The program showed promising early results. Puppies who participated in cat-guided socialization displayed increased calm behavior, better impulse control, and more thoughtful interaction patterns. While not every dog became as thoroughly cat-like as Milo, many showed significant improvements in behaviors that made them more suitable for family life. Sarah found herself invited to speak at the annual conference of the American Veterinary Medical Association, addressing an audience of thousands of veterinary professionals about Milo's development and its implications for animal behavior understanding. Milo's story teaches us that we need to look beyond breed expectations and see each animal as an individual with unique potential, she told the audience. When we create supportive environments that allow for authentic development, animals will show us capabilities we never knew existed. The standing ovation that followed was emotional for Sarah, who remembered the scared puppy she had found in the clinic just 2 years earlier. That abandoned baby had grown into an ambassador for his entire breed, and a symbol of the transformative power of love and acceptance. International recognition followed the veterinary conference. Animal welfare organizations in Europe, Australia, and Asia began implementing programs inspired by Milo's story. A rescue facility in the United Kingdom started a cat teacher program, pairing rescue dogs with therapy cats to encourage calm, thoughtful behavior development. The most surprising development came when Sarah received a call from the mayor's office in her own city. The mayor wanted to present Milo with a key to the city and declare him an official ambassador for animal welfare and breed equality. Your dog has done more to change perceptions about pit bulls than years of legislation and advocacy, the mayor's assistant explained. He's become a symbol of how individual character matters more than stereotypes. The ceremony was held in the city park, with hundreds of attendees, including families with their own rescued pit bulls, veterinary professionals, and animal welfare advocates. Milo accepted his key to the city with typical feline dignity, posing for photos while maintaining his characteristic calm composure. But perhaps the most touching moment came when a little girl in the crowd called out, "Milo taught me that different doesn't mean bad." Her mother later explained that their family had been afraid of big dogs until seeing Milo's story, which led them to adopt a senior pit bull from the local shelter. As Sarah looked out at the crowd of people whose lives had been touched by Milo's story, she realized that his impact was still growing. What had started as one small dog learning to fit into a family of cats had become a movement that was changing laws, saving lives, and opening hearts around the world. The quiet apartment that had once housed 3 cats and their new puppy brother had somehow become the starting point for a revolution in how people thought about animals, stereotypes, and the power of acceptance. And at the center of it all was Milo, still just being himself, a dog who happened to think he was a cat, and who had never seen any reason why that should be a problem. 3 years after that first rainy morning when Sarah found Milo shivering behind the clinic, the impact of one small dog's story had rippled out in ways no one could have predicted. The abandoned puppy who was expected to live maybe a week had become a global phenomenon, but more importantly, he had saved countless lives and changed countless hearts. The numbers were staggering when Sarah finally sat down to calculate them. Over 50 shelters across North America reported measurable increases in pit bull adoptions directly attributed to the Milo effect, breed-specific. Legislation had been overturned in 3 cities after council members watched Milo's videos. Educational programs based on his story were being used in schools across 15 countries to teach children about acceptance and looking beyond appearances. But for Sarah, the most meaningful impact remained personal and individual. The messages that arrived daily from families whose lives had been changed by Milo's example. There was the letter from a military veteran who had been afraid to adopt a pit bull for therapy work, until seeing Milo's gentle nature. There was the photo from a retirement home, where a pit bull cat pair now provided comfort to elderly residents, inspired by Milo's cross-species friendship model. One message that particularly touched Sarah came from a teacher in rural Montana. "I showed my 3rd grade class Milo's videos when we were studying different animals," she wrote. "Now my students use 'Be like Milo' as their motto when someone seems different or doesn't fit in. They've learned that different can be wonderful." Dr. Rodriguez's research had evolved into a comprehensive study involving hundreds of animals across multiple species. Her findings were being published in peer-reviewed journals and presented at international conferences, legitimizing what Sarah had observed in her living room into scientific fact. Milo has fundamentally changed how we understand neuroplasticity in young animals, Dr. Rodriguez explained during their latest collaboration. His case proves that social environment during critical development periods can literally reshape brain architecture. We're now seeing applications for this research in treating behavioral issues, improving shelter animal outcomes, and even understanding human development. The scientific community had embraced Milo's story as proof of concepts they had theorized but never fully documented. Universities were establishing research programs based on cross-species socialization, and veterinary schools were incorporating Milo's case study into their curricula. Meanwhile, Milo himself remained blissfully unaware of his celebrity status. At 3 years old, he had grown into a magnificent dog, powerful and athletic like his breed suggested, but still utterly cat-like in his demeanor and behavior. He continued to greet each day with feline grace, finding sunny spots for afternoon naps, maintaining his careful grooming routines, and showing the same thoughtful consideration for his family that had charmed Sarah from the beginning. His relationship with Whiskers, Luna, and Midnight had deepened into something that transcended species entirely. They moved through the apartment like a choreographed dance troupe, each knowing exactly where the others would be and what they needed. When Whiskers, now an elderly cat, began showing signs of arthritis, Milo instinctively adjusted his behavior to be even gentler and more considerate. The apartment had been renovated to accommodate Milo's unique needs and their family's growing fame. Cat trees now extended to the ceiling to provide climbing opportunities for all four animals. A specially designed meditation corner featured cushions arranged for optimal sunbathing, where the family could often be found in peaceful communion. Sarah had also changed, evolved by the experience of raising such an unusual ambassador. She had left her job at the veterinary clinic to manage Milo's growing platform full-time, using their story to advocate for animal welfare, breed equality, and the importance of giving every individual, human or animal, the space to be authentically themselves. The Sarah Martinez Foundation for Cross-Species Understanding had been established with donations from Milo's fans around the world. The foundation funded research into innovative socialization techniques, provided grants to shelters implementing cross-species programs, and supported families adopting animals who didn't fit typical behavioral expectations. Milo taught me that when we approach others without preconceptions, when we let individuals show us who they really are, we discover possibilities we never imagined, Sarah would tell audiences at the dozens of speaking engagements she now attended annually. The ripple effects continued to expand. A major pet food company had partnered with Sarah to create educational materials about responsible pet ownership and the importance of early socialization. A children's television show had developed a character based on Milo, teaching young viewers about acceptance and friendship across differences, but perhaps the most significant long-term impact was in how Milo's story had shifted the conversation about breed-specific legislation and discrimination. Legal experts were using his case as an example of how individual assessment mattered more than breed assumptions. Animal welfare organizations had adopted the Milo principle, the idea that every animal deserved to be evaluated as an individual rather than a representative of their breed or species. One evening, as Sarah sat in their peaceful apartment watching her unusual family settle into their nighttime routines, she reflected on the journey that had brought them all here. Milo was performing his evening grooming ritual, carefully cleaning his paws in the delicate manner he had learned from his cat siblings. Whiskers was offering his wisdom through gentle headbutts and purrs. Luna and Midnight were arranging themselves in their preferred sleeping positions, all within protective sight of their dog brother. The phone rang. It often did now, with interview requests, collaboration proposals, and invitations to share their story. But Sarah let it go to voicemail. Right now, she wanted to simply be present with this remarkable family that had taught her so much about love, acceptance, and the beautiful unpredictability of life. Later, when she listened to the message, she learned it was from a filmmaker who wanted to create a full-length documentary about Milo's impact on animal welfare and social perception. It was an opportunity that would have seemed impossible just 3 years earlier, when she was a veterinary assistant living quietly with 3 cats. But as Sarah looked at Milo, now peacefully curled in his favorite sunny spot, making his gentle purring sound as he drifted off to sleep, she realized that the most extraordinary transformation had been the simplest one. A scared, abandoned puppy had found a family who loved him exactly as he was, and in return, he had shown the world that love, acceptance, and authentic self-expression could literally change everything. The story that had begun with one small dog learning to be a cat had become something much larger, a testament to the power of approaching others with open hearts, of seeing potential instead of limitations, and of believing that every individual, regardless of species or stereotype, had something beautiful to offer the world. Milo's legacy wasn't just about a pit bull who thought he was a cat. It was about the transformative power of unconditional acceptance, and how one small life, lived authentically and loved completely, could ripple outward to touch millions of others. In a world that often demanded conformity, Milo had shown that being genuinely yourself was not just acceptable, it was revolutionary. As Sarah turned off the lights and prepared for bed, she could hear the gentle sounds of her family settling in for the night. 4 very different animals, brought together by chance and bound together by love, creating a harmony that proved every day that family isn't about being the same. It's about choosing to belong to each other, exactly as you are.